Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the My Impossible podcast. Today, I am excited to welcome my friend and Kilimanjaro teammate, Chris Heim. I met Chris through the power of digital networking on LinkedIn about 5 years ago. And when Chris and I connected, we immediately had rapport and a deeper connection around this idea of servant leadership. And since then, Chris and I have stayed in contact. His journey has unfolded as an executive in technology companies. He's now serving as CEO at Atomic in the Minneapolis area. And in this conversation, Chris shares his impossible around something he's never shared publicly before. And he takes us into the journey around his impossible and how it has informed who he is and what his why is today. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Chris Heim. Chris Heim, I am just beyond stoked to be here with you and to have you as a guest on the show.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm thrilled to be here as well. We've had a lot of years together.
Yeah. And it just, you've commented on this in a few spaces, but, you and I met via LinkedIn. We've never met in person. And now you are on the Kilimanjaro team.
I know. I'm so thrilled, man.
And we're going to be together in person a little over a month, about 6 weeks in Colorado for training. So
yes, sir. I can't wait.
Super excited to give you a big hug.
Yes, likewise.
So with all that said, Chris, what is your impossible?
Jeff, my impossible, the story I want to tell you today, this is the first time that I've told this story outside of my very, private circle. And that is that I made a decision almost 11 years ago, May 17th, 11 years ago, that I decided to take alcohol out of my life. And I'm actually quite proud to tell the story to you and for your podcast today because you've inspired me so much and you're making such a difference in so many people's lives through your story. And, my hope is just maybe a few people will hear my story and, I don't know, maybe I can make a small impact, for others. But that is my impossible. It is the journey I've been on the last 11 years.
So could you take us into that a little bit? Take us into that season, when you made that decision, what was happening before and what was that decision to take that impossible on?
Yeah. Well, so Jeff, like 11 years ago, that was about when I first had my first CEO role. And I started noticing a few things were happening to me. I was starting to have more anxiety. I just wasn't always feeling very good. I've always had claustrophobia kind of my whole life, and it was very pronounced. I was traveling a lot globally, long 2-week trips to Asia. And I started getting kind of panicky when I would get on, like on the trains, in China, and they were very packed. And I just started having some issues. And then the other thing I noticed is, I've always had drinks, like, alcohol was just always kind of part of my life, but I never really felt like it was a problem. But I started realizing that alcohol had a voice in my head, and that voice was getting louder for me. That, it was very seldom that I would actually drink more than I should. But what I was starting to notice is that whenever I would just have one drink, if that was my goal for the night, whatever, the whole night I had this voice in the back of my head pushing me like to have another drink. And it really was becoming a strong voice. And there were times when I, kind of succumbed to that, whatever. But two really important things happened. One, I went to my annual physical with my doctor, just kind of normal run of the mill. And I just told him, I said, I'm feeling like alcohol is having a stronger impact on me. And I'm also noticing more anxiety and claustrophobia. And, the backdrop, you know me pretty well. I'm an endurance athlete. I push myself. I do really hard things. And my doctor, he's the same age as me. We've been together for years. He's like, Chris, he said, here's his like unofficial assessment is I have a very high threshold. I have a very, very high discipline of myself, and I'm able to push myself. So I have a high ceiling. And he said that as I get older, and I have to acknowledge that with being a CEO, a parent, traveling, that ceiling, whatever I'm used to, was starting to come down a little bit. And so he said that, the way I live my life, I'm going to bump up against that ceiling more often. And so he said, whether it's alcohol, stress, these things, I might have to think about them differently going forward because they probably are going to have a more pronounced effect on me. And the other is I had a discussion with my wife. Like we've been married at the time, probably, 18 years. We've been married, 27 now or so. And I just said, Heidi, that voice in your head when you have a drink and then all night long, that voice is telling you to have another drink. And she just said, Chris, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it was really the first time that I realized that, yeah, maybe there's something going on inside me that's different than anybody else. And I just never talked about it before. So I'll stop there so you can ask me a question. But those are like two really big aha moments for me about 11 years ago that just helped me look at the world a little bit differently going forward.
And I'm wondering in that period of time when these two pivotal conversations happened, what was it that led you to the decision that you made?
Yeah. Well, I like to have control over my schedule and what I do. And I try to live a really good life. So I had to kind of confront this reality of what my doctor had said. And then, my wife helped me realize that maybe alcohol was having a different effect on me. Then I just kind of figured everybody had that, that kind of reaction. And, and I started just really paying attention to my family history and just my own personal history. And I basically came to the unofficial determination that, I probably have alcoholism, but I never allowed myself to become an alcoholic. And that's just Chris Heim words right there. There's no official element to that. But what it meant to me is that I probably do have alcohol probably affects me differently than others. I learned that through my wife's comments and, just reflecting and being honest about some of my behaviors, and so coming up with that determination, I was able to kind of compartmentalize it for me that, okay, I have anxiety. I'm not ashamed of that. I've learned how to deal with that. Some of our weaknesses are what, turns our strengths or vice versa. And so I just labeled it. I'm like, okay, I probably have alcoholism, but I'm not living an alcoholic life. I'm not making alcohol hasn't entered my life and become a problem. But if I'm listening to what my doctor said, there's a chance that it could. And I just had so many great things going on with, my family, my kids, my job. And so I just woke up one Sunday morning and I told Heidi, I said, I don't know that this is a forever decision, but as of today, I'm done. And I've never looked back, and it's almost been 11 years.
It, as you describe it, just your words, even in your mannerisms, it felt natural for that Sunday morning decision to happen. The show is called My Impossible Podcast. Our mission is titled My Impossible. Where was the feeling through this journey, this leg of the journey, or maybe since, where it truly felt like this is an impossible?
I think the impossible part for me, Jeff, was really just more of an internal one of just acknowledging that I have an issue that I probably have known for a while and I just didn't confront it, and so confronting it, like the alcohol part, that really wasn't that scary for me or that my impossible, but it was everything around it. It was, well, what does this mean for my social life, for my friends? How will be, when I tell people I'm not drinking anymore, what will they think of me? So the impossible was more of just all the unknowns that go with it. And also the impossible was, is this a forever decision? And that seemed pretty daunting to me. And I don't even know if I really felt like I needed to make a forever decision. So all that felt, kind of impossible, I guess. Um, but it also made a lot of things possible. And maybe the final comment I want to make on this is, although you and I met years after I had made that decision, you said something very powerful to me that has stuck with me since the day that we met. Um, Actually, it was a month after we met, because we did a podcast like this probably almost 5 years ago now, and I did not know that you were in a wheelchair. Didn't you never said it to me. We did a podcast. I met you online. I'd never met you in person. And then it was about a month later that I saw a posting from you that it was a full body picture and you were in a wheelchair. And I called you up, and you told me your story. Well, you said one really powerful thing, because I said, "Well, Jeff, why didn't you tell me?" And you said, "Chris, it doesn't define me." And that has stuck with me. It's one of the things that makes me I respect you so much for that. And I think that is how I would position, whatever issues I have with alcohol. It doesn't define me, and it actually has inspired me. And I think that's part of the My Impossible story for each of us as well, is taking whatever hardships we have and flipping them upside down and turning them into something good. And I think I have done that with my story.
Yeah. What strikes me, Chris, is this journey that I think all humans have it, but I think for us as men in our 40s and early 50s, especially, this whole idea of identity. At some moments, we feel trapped by the identity that the world and circumstance has placed on us. And you didn't say those words exactly, but you by the fact of you were in the season of your first CEO job and expectations of traveling and engaging all over the world. I'm wondering, what was the pressure you felt? Again, whether alcohol was part of it or not, but just from your identity, what was the pressure you felt about your identity during that season?
Oh man, it's a great question, Jeff, and I love how you're phrasing it, because it actually is one of the big victories, I would say, of my life. All of us have pressure, right? We all have pressure. We all have self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all these things. There's this, I believe that everybody has a certain amount of, doubt in their head, that chirps in the back of their head at times. And I certainly have had, plenty of that in my life. And that's been part of my mission. And I suppose I mostly compartmentalize it around trying to be the best CEO I can, but it's actually helped me be the best person I can. And that is also why I do endurance sports, is I want to embrace that challenge. I think the learning that I've had over the last decade is you shouldn't wake up every morning looking for a perfect day, because when you do, everything is a surprise and a derailment. And instead, I've been trying to just hone my mindset and my body of being ready for whatever happens and finding happiness and joy and corrective action in everything that goes wrong versus being surprised by it. And it's literally been a journey of mine to sharpen that mindset. And I train my body partly because I love doing it, but also I'm training my mind on how to deal with hardship, so that when I show up for work and inevitably there's going to be something every day that doesn't quite go right, that it's just, okay, bring it. We're ready for it. And yeah, I think that has actually been a big, big part of me figuring out who I am over the last decade, is embracing those hardships and turning them into just wonderful outcomes,
What would you say was the biggest should around identity of a CEO and of a husband and of a father, as a father of a growing, now adult children? What would you say is the biggest should around your identity that you had to break away from?
I think I felt that I needed to portray some kind of image that I was always in control, and that I didn't have emotions, and I didn't have uncertainties, and I'm a pretty open person anyway, so these things probably come pretty natural for me. But the more vulnerable I am, the more authentic I am, and the more confidence I have around just showing up and just being me. for sure, I have a bigger impact on those around me, and I feel better about myself. And I think in those early years, I was just trying to figure it out. And I think so. To be honest, I think at times I was trying to be somebody else because I thought there was like this prototypical image that I was trying to be. And perhaps, the escape of alcohol at times and so forth was just a way of trying to unplug from some of that stress and just looking for some way of just detaching from that because it was overwhelming at times. And not that I don't have any of those emotions now, I certainly do, but I know how to handle them far better and in a much healthier manner.
Mm. Yeah, I can so relate to that, the pressure of that identity around, I got it all figured out. I don't need anybody. But at the same time, there's a voice that's in the back of your head. You're behind. You got to play catch up. You don't belong here. So you gotta stay the course of having it all together. That is I can imagine, I know the pressure that I feel around that. I can imagine at this senior most position of a company, the power of those voices.
Yeah, the ruminating around all that it can overwhelm you. And again, kind of like I didn't really understand that alcohol was having a different impact on me and that voice in my head. I imagine, and I don't think I'm wrong in this, but I imagine that everybody has a certain element of the voice in their head around something, self-doubt, negative talk, whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, if whether the story specifically around alcohol resonates with people or not, I think the story around being kind to yourself and controlling your mindset, compartmentalizing your bad moments. And we all need to give ourselves those moments, but compartmentalize them and then shake it off and then get back into that positive mindset and, compartmentalizing those weaknesses. And not that we'll ever fully conquer them, but, kind of name them and just, you got to live with them. And you're living with your realities, your hardships. And look at what it's doing. It's turning it into a beautiful journey, like taking those hardships and instead of dwelling on them or beating yourself up or saying, I'm not good enough, all that negative talk, find a way of turning it upside down and say, okay, this is my thing. This is the baggage that I carry around in my life. How do I turn that into a positive that, can bring happiness? And perhaps even more important is be an inspiration for others. And that's really important to me is, I'm not trying to be anybody else but me. And I sure hope along the way that I've helped somebody somewhere along the way through some hardship because of my willingness to share, different parts of my story.
Mm. And lots of people in my life I'm touched and impressed by their purpose and their why. And you may be, I don't know, in the top quartile, let's just say, of those folks. I just sense that this backstory of both the alcohol, but also confronting your identity, has had a big impact in your why. What is that connection between what you've shared and what your why is today?
Yeah, well, yeah. And so the my why, in fact, I know if we were to go play back the podcast from 5 years ago, I developed my why about the same time. So I came out of that whole decision and, kind of the backdrop. I took about a year to define my why. It was a very, very intentional process for me. And I came up with 3 metaphors that I came up with 10 years ago that are just as real today. I know I've reviewed those with you in the past, but the first one is the beach ball. And the beach ball to me is, like a beach ball is only fun if it's fully inflated. And it's a reminder to me that I have to fully inflate myself. If I want to have the biggest impact on others in the world, I have to inflate myself. And so I have to focus on me and make sure that I'm showing up in the right healthy mindset and so forth to have the biggest impact on others. So the beach ball is that metaphor for just be me. An upside down triangle, upside down rock stack is how I view leadership. and that leaders are at the bottom. I'm a servant leader. I'm here to lift up and elevate others. And that's been really important on my journey of who I want to be as a leader. And then the calligraphy pen has been the metaphor for we all are the authors of our own novel. And it's a reminder to me about mindset that no matter what's happening in the world, I'm always in control of how I let my mind respond to whatever external things are going on. And I remind myself that I'm writing my story. Nobody else is writing it for me. And so I always have a choice, no matter what's going on in my life, about how I want that part of my life to unfold in my story. And those three metaphors have been so powerful for me, Jeff. And I just so would encourage everybody to go through a process like this, like that, because you really learn who you are. And it's a great way of, like, I have daily reminders off, all the time, sticking to that my why.
Does bringing in the idea of an impossible with your why, does it, just given the state of the world, again, pressure, you're in a CEO role again, with a huge challenge in front of you, does holding fast to your why and the values that surround that, in what ways does that at times feel impossible?
It feels impossible often. It's tough. There's no doubt. It's tough. And I'm looking at the mountain behind you. What we're going to do later on this year is tough, but it's those tough things that make us better. It's being in the pain avoidance. That's not a way to live life. And yeah, there's things all the time that could derail me. And I'll be honest, I'm not a perfect person. I have my moments. I have just figured out how to compartmentalize them, live in that moment for however long I need to, and then shake myself out and get back at it. And, that ties back to endurance sports for me. I do really hard things in part because I enjoy them, but in part because it tests you up here and it tests your heart. And it's a muscle like anything else in our life that I want to work that out. Mm-hmm. So that when real world problems hit me, I feel like I'm just conditioned for them. It doesn't mean that they don't hit me and that they're not hard. And I certainly don't deal with them all perfectly, but it's part of my training. It's just part of the journey for me. And so, yeah, my why gets tested a lot. I probably over-index at times by working too many hours. I have a high threshold for that, which probably has other unhealthy elements. But in total, I think I'm just in pretty good check with who I am, and I think I catch myself before I get off track most of the time.
You mentioned a few other players, predominantly your wife, Heidi, and the voice of your longtime doctor. I'm wondering how else would you describe the role of community? Our phrase at My Impossible is our possible, pointing to the power of community. As you look back at the last decade and more, what's been the role of community in both taking on your impossible? Again, we touched on identity, and then here this last piece around staying true to your why.
I'm very blessed, Jeff. I have some really wonderful pockets of friends. I have two different groups of guys that I hang out with. We travel, once to twice a year. There's an element of just having fun, but there's a fellowship to it. We have been there for each other through thick and thin. Surrounding yourself with people that will give you the real story. My friends know that I want to hear if they're seeing me or watching me, observing me getting off track. I want to know that you got to surround yourself with people that love you enough to tell you the hard stuff. And I absolutely have that in my life, not just through my wife. She's very supportive, and I appreciate her so much. I have some groups of friends that are that for me as well. And I take it very seriously that I need to give back to the community. I have been able to accomplish things in my career that I want to share that message with others to help others. And so being part of broader communities, like I love doing podcasts like this and sharing my story. It's a great way of, touching people. I'm a volunteer mayor for our little city. I try to give back to our community. I'm trying to do the best I can to balance it out. I feel like I'm so blessed and so many things are coming my way, and I'm trying to counterbalance that by giving back more than I receive. And I think most days I'm successful at that.
Mm. As a leader of an organization, where do you see the biggest opportunity within the folks that you're entrusted with to lead? Where do you see the biggest opportunity for them to embrace the hour possible? Where do you see that most?
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff, my feeling is that I'll call it generally, I'll call it middle management. It's either by way of title, or people are midway through their career and learning how to be a leader. I think it's the most underserved part of corporate America. As executives, we have access to all kinds of different conferences, and we have access to things that, my 20-year-old self, I wish that I would have had access to things that I have access to now. And some of that just comes with time and wisdom. The segment of our business that I'm trying to impact the most, and whatever message I can share to the broader world, I think I'm trying to really speak to people that are in that mid-career or middle management role. They are so important because they are the leaders of the people that are on the front line of every business. As executives, you get further and further detached from the reality in the day-to-day. And, you've got hundreds or thousands or tens of employees. It doesn't matter. The people that are showing up and doing the work every day need a great leader, somebody that can knock down barriers, inspire them, create an environment where they can be successful. And that middle management layer is so important. And I think it's overlooked on the importance that those leaders, the importance that they serve in a company. And so that is part of my longer term mission, like whatever retirement might look like for me, I will pour more of my attention back into giving. That's part of my impossible, is to figure out how to make a bigger impact in that segment of businesses.
Mm. So lots of people hopefully will hear this, your story today, Chris, but just given what you just said, if all those mid-level or mid-career people listened to this podcast when it's released in the coming weeks, and you would hope for them out of this one thing, what would you hope for them in hearing your story?
It's going to be hard for me to boil it down to one thing. Let's try, Jeff. First of all, I would give everybody permission to, yes, it's hard. There are hard things, and to just acknowledge that and to find ways of not only coping with it, but turning those hardships into something you can thrive from. Whatever those hardships are, everybody has them. The second is, I'm going to give you one answer, but three parts, I guess. The second is you've got to intentionally train your mind, your heart, your soul, your body it's part of the journey. You can't just take it for granted. So if you're trying to be a leader, you're trying to do hard things, you've got to expose yourself to those hard things to get better. And maybe that will help people not be so surprised when they deal with the hardship, and instead, embrace that. And then the other is you got to give back. And part of giving back, it actually, I feel like I get way more out of things than what I put into them. But part of giving back is it's the enriching, thing. And so if I were to stitch that all together, it's learn how to compartmentalize the tough things and turn them into opportunities. Train every part of your being to deal with adversity in life, and then find your message and give that back to others. And that will further strengthen all that for yourself.
So good, Chris. This is a gift. You're a gift.
Oh, you're so awesome.
I can't wait for the story to keep unfolding.
I am. Thank you. I was really excited to do this with you today. I can't wait to give you an in-person hug in a few weeks from now. I am so inspired by you and this mission to climb Kilimanjaro, and it's a metaphor. It's a pretty cool thing in and of itself, but it's also an amazing metaphor. And I applaud you for creating this opportunity for all of us to be part of your impossible. And you've inspired me.
So good, man. Thanks a million.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff.